Hello, today we're going to start talking about prisms, but before we get too far I want to go ahead and just mention some vocabulary, and then we will talk about formulas involved with prisms. So let's look at our vocabulary first. The first piece of vocabulary is just a net. A net is a two-dimensional drawing of a three-dimensional object. So if we imagine that we had this shape and the shape was made of paper, we could cut along some of the edges and we could unfold it. And so my two triangles are these two triangles right here, and then my rectangular sides all go over here. And so this is just if I flattened out this two-dimensional image. Let's talk about the different pieces. The first piece I want to talk about is a face. Our faces are polygons that form a three-dimensional object. And so this right here is one of our faces. This would be another face. And this would be a third face. And of course this is a cube, and so the cube would have 6 faces, but we only see 3 from the angle that we're looking at. Now of those faces, we have bases. Now the bases are the two congruent parallel faces. And so I could call this a base. And the other base would be out behind it. And so if this is my base, then the other base would involve those two, and it would be shaded over there. And we don't actually see it because of the way that this picture is drawn. On a rectangular prism, you have some freedom on your bases. But if the prism is not rectangular, if it is in fact triangular, then our bases are the two sides that make the non-rectangles. And those would be our bases. Now our base edges, those are simply the edges that form the base. And so my base edges would just be the edges here. And it's just the edges part. And so I would also have base edges here and here. So again, the base edges on our triangular prism, those would be the edges that are along the outside. Now if we have base edges, we also have lateral edges. Those cover our lateral sides. And the lateral edges would be the edges that connect our bases. And in fact, we have one more lateral edge that we can't see that would go back here. So to form all the lateral edges. And then these sides that are made with our lateral edges and our bases, those would be considered the lateral sides. Now again, if our shape is a rectangular prism, then we can decide whatever side to be our base. But if it's instead something else like this triangular prism, then the lateral edges are simply the lines that go from one base to the next base. And generally those give us our height of our figure. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to go ahead and say these lateral edges that they are the height of our figure. And then we have our vertexes. The vertexes, those are simply just the corners that make up our shape. Okay, and because the way this shape is presented, I'm missing out on one of my corners. The other corner would be hidden back here. And again, in our shape, our vertexes are simply the corners. Now, let's go ahead and really quickly label this one. Our vertexes would be our corners. I'm just marking them on the bases because I know that these would fold up and match those corners also. Our base edges, those would be the edges of my triangle. And my bases would be the triangles, which would make my lateral edges, these edges right here. And these would be my lateral faces. So with that basic vocabulary out the way, let's go ahead and look at some basic formulas. Let's start with the surface area formula. The surface area is just the sum of the lateral faces plus the sum of the bases. Okay? And so this is actually in two parts. For the lateral faces, it's simply the perimeter times the height. And so that would be the lateral area, which I want to go ahead and add down here. The lateral area equals the perimeter times the height. And the surface area, well, that equals our lateral area, the perimeter times the height, plus the area of my bases. And remember that on our prisms, we have two bases, and so that would be 2b, where b stands for the area of the base. Okay? Very important that you know that that's the area of the base, which means that you have to calculate it. It depends on what shape that base is. So that's surface area. And now volume. Well, volume is a simpler formula. For volume, we need the area of the base and the height of our prism. And it's simply that volume equals the area of the base times the height of the prism. And so we're going to be putting these two formulas into practice as we find the various areas of our prisms. Thank you and have a good day.